property probably won't make most people rich. If you could change anything throughout your journey, outside of maybe spending that 10 grand on the rent to rent, what would you change?
The biggest thing for me was, before you go into business with anybody, stress test it.
Do you think HMOs have an unfair negative reputation?
Maybe slightly controversial, but I think
And welcome back to another episode of the PBK podcast. Each and every week, we bring you a special guest to discuss all things property business, making money and taking your business to the next level. Today, I'm joined by Adriana Cafasso. Have I pronounced that correctly?
yes, you have. Better than the other one.
Because, what happened was, okay, so you give me, because you have a background, Italian background.
Italian background.
Give me the Italian pronunciation.
Adriana Cafasso.
See, when I read it, I heard it like with like more of a Nigerian pronunciation.
This
like,
is what we were working on, yeah.
Adriana Cafasso. You never had that one?
I've never had it before, but maybe we could
that
rebrand.
Maybe that would be a new thing.
Yeah, maybe.
So you are a superstar in your own space, focusing on HMOs, particularly high-yielding HMOs in the Northeast. Have also built out your own construction element to the business, as well as the property management as well. So very all-encompassing.
Yes.
Have you always been based in the Northeast?
Well, no. So I was originally outside of Manchester, like countryside. Went to Newcastle for uni and just ended up kind of sticking around. Sort of COVID was happening as I was graduating on my final year, so moved home for maybe like 12 months and then realised that the Northeast was kind of just where it made sense for the business, and I just love it there.
So speaking, what's your business called?
Cafasso Developments.
Oh, good pronunciation
so
again,
we
makes
do have to
sense.
pronounce it,
Okay. Great plug. Okay, so when was Cafasso Developments birthed?
That was in 2022.
Okay, so relatively recently in terms of the number of projects you're currently doing.
Yeah.
So what did you actually study at uni?
I did law. So my degree was in law, graduated, and then kind of got to the point of, do I want to do this full time? Do I want to pursue it? Kind of always had the route of taking my own business. I think had COVID not have happened, I probably would have done the route of finish uni, travel, and then decide. Obviously that happened, so I was very much at home, started a small business from that, and then just kind of got the bug for entrepreneurship, building out, and then obviously the property route was the ideal one.
So did you finish uni?
Yeah, I graduated.
Okay, so
I got the degree.
Okay.
I did go to do a master's, realised bad idea, but I got the degree.
Okay,
as like my
amazing.
little safety net.
Amazing. And what was your first business?
So that was a small sort of customising Jordan Air Force business. Started that the day I graduated. Did pretty well from it. Made quite a bit of money over like a 6-month period, and then decided to move into property.
What was your biggest takeaway from your first business?
You have to work really, really, really hard.
Oh, it's not just like entrepreneur, own boss.
No,
time in the sun.
Yeah, like obviously you learn that the freedom that came from it. Like I kind of took the route of finish uni. I've made quite a lot of money, which is probably not the normal position to find you as soon as you graduate. And then I had that lump sum of money, and I was kind of smart to think, do you know what? You've worked really hard to build this. You can either, take whatever next route that is, or you can invest it in something further, which I did. Obviously, property training to then build it out further. So it was kind of that delayed gratification, I guess. I guess that's what I learned.
Okay, and in terms of where was your sort of first foray into property? Like, where did you first learn about investing in property?
So I did, so YouTube. YouTube was the first thing. So obviously watching podcasts and watching YouTube channels and understanding that, seeing the quick route, I guess, kind of thing. Then went to get property mentorship and just built like that. I think I was very, very good in sort of seeing this is a blueprint, and obviously it's a blueprint that just shows do this and you'll get there. obviously in reality it's a lot harder, and there's a lot more turns, there's a lot more problems that you're going to have to face. And kind of from day one, I sort of realized that I didn't go in with the mindset of, oh, this is going to change my life in 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. More like I've got a year to kind of build something quite stable, and then from there, year on year, try and improve and try and be better from that.
Even to get to the point where you were like Googling property videos on YouTube, what was it about property that actually interested you to even start researching in the first place?
I think it's always something that's been on my mind. Like, I've always wanted to do the buying, the renovating, doing up houses. And it's kind of, I mean, I think with pretty much anything, I think even from the sort of first books I started reading that gave me that insight, like Rich Dad Poor Dad, most people's first book that they read into it, it was all about having assets. And what is that? That's mostly comes from property and owning real estate. So that was kind of in the back of our mind of, okay, if you want to go this entrepreneur life and you want to have these luxuries of life, you've got to have that solid base, you've got to build the asset. So property is kind of the thing for that.
I think the more people I speak to, the more I've realized that when I always ask, like, but why property? For a lot of people, it's like, well, property is the end result of making money. Like for most of us, if we talk about our residential home, whether it be your monthly repayments on your mortgage or your initial deposit, it's your biggest expense. It's what you're building up to. So as soon as you start to make money, whether it be for a business, job, saving, most people's in the back of their mind is, well, I'm going to invest this.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's the thing. It's property was that kind of vehicle to building out the life that you want to live, so to speak.
But then what about distractions? Because like when you've graduated 21, 22 and you've made money, but like, why not just go to Ibiza?
I mean, I did.
Okay.
I did.
Yeah.
I did that the year before. So I kind of had my fun of like, okay, well, this is great fun, but this doesn't sort of sustain, building it out. And it's having that long-term drive. And I guess just the way that I've seen it growing up, like if you want it, you have to work really hard for it. And there is always time to have fun and to chill out. And sometimes I've, I guess, gone past that point and, you go to the burnout stage and it's trying to find that balance. But like going to Ibiza, if you've got one pot of cash that's not making any money, how many times can you really go?
Yeah, well, you would be surprised. but yeah, from a smart perspective, it's not what you should do. What about like your friend circle at that time? Because I know like me at sort of 2021, my mindset of what I want to do isn't focused on, delayed gratification. It's very much on the now and the instant endorphins of I want rewards and nice things. What was it like with your friends when you were telling them I'm looking into investing into property?
I think at the start, most people didn't really get it. I kind of just did it. I sort of made that move. I moved back home from uni, so from living with friends, moved back home with my parents when I first started out because I'd invested most of it into the training. So luckily, I could kind of like shut myself off from the world a little bit, which I did initially starting out. Now, like, they're all so supportive, which is so nice. And I guess I'm quite lucky that I've got quite a lot of friends that want to be in sort of the creative space or building things for themselves. So there is that understanding there. And I think some of them still think I work for people. Like, they still think I have a job, and it's just trying not to get too into it, so to speak, and just knowing that this is what I'm doing, this is where I'm going in. People are supportive, but I've got people in the industry who I can lean on for problems and like dealing with things that happen in the business and getting advice that way. So it's like it's a very open kind of, it's a big community in the property industry. I mean, like, we all know so many people, so it's quite nice to know that you've got people on that side that you can lean on. And then when I need to step away from it all, I've got my friends there as well, which is quite nice. It's like a little shut-off point.
That's nice. So you can have that degree of separation.
Yeah.
And then with your parents, like when you said like, Mum, by the way, I did really well, made money, set up a business, but like I've invested it all in a training course. Did she not look at you like you'd bought magic beans for a little while? Or did she always believe?
Both. I did like the staged approach. So the first instance was, it was my money. So it was my decision to do what I did. And I think because they'd seen what they're entrepreneurs themselves, so they've seen, you know, if you want something, you have to seriously put every belief into that and work so hard to do it. So they already had that base of understanding. The second part was they saw, I guess, what I had done. So I got my degree, and then what I built with the shoe business. Like, they saw that I was also working at the time as well. So I was pretty much like a 6 till 12 everyday girl of work, gym, work on my other job, kind of nonstop. So they saw that I very much had the drive to do it. I think, when I first told them that I've spent a couple £1,000 on a few training days, they were a bit like, oh, it's a scam. You need to be really, really careful. But by the second time, when it came to sort of the big expense, they knew that I was very serious about what I was doing. You know, I'd spent months leading up to one of the first training days, putting all the prep in, setting up the company, doing all the back office work sort of thing. So I think they kind of just knew, like, if she said she's doing it, she's going to do it, kind of thing.
That's good. That's good that you got support. But I think also you have to be very driven in what you're doing as well, to not listen to the background noise.
Yeah.
So transitioning from obviously starting out, just doing your own research, getting your own education, then now you're at a point where you said you're doing, up to like 20 deals throughout a year and looking to scale that. But before we get into where you are now, like, what did your first deal look like? 'Cause I think that's where a lot of people get lost. Like, how do I get from this one pot of cash to doing one thing to scaling it for it to being an actual all-encompassing business?
A lot of mistakes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So I think when I first started out, one of my first deals was kind of the rent-to-rent route, because obviously I'd spent most of the money that I had on the training. So I went down that route, and it was kind of, I partnered up. They found the site, and then I did the management of it, which was good because it gives you kind of that base understanding of property investment. On the side of that, I was then obviously doing the deal sourcing, so finding sites and then selling them on to investors. Now, I think initially I was kind of wanting to, source and sell the BRR, because that's always where my heart had been. But I was very new into the property world, so I couldn't fully grasp exactly what that meant, everything with it. And I was quite a perfectionist. So I sat back on a lot of deals, I would say, initially.
Yeah.
Kind of that analysis paralysis, looking too much into it. Oh, I don't want to put this to an investor in case I've missed something here. And I still think about some of the sites that I found when I first started. I would really have done something great with that now. But it was that lesson, the trial and error, learning how to stack a site, learning how to do that. So from there, obviously had the first rent to rent, was trying to source and sell BRRs for a while. It wasn't working out. It was quite slow. I sold one, then fell out of bed. So I was like, you get that grasp of, oh my God, I've just made £3,000. Oh my God, that's gone. I've not made that anymore. So it was just like a lot of trial and error, going backwards and forwards. And then I was like, look, you are in the rent to rent space, so maybe you should sell rent to rents, because you can clearly stack it up, because you see every expense that goes out of this 2-bed apartment in Liverpool every month, and you see how your occupancy works. So it's quite easy to then replicate that for a client. So I did that. I had quite a bit of success with that. Made, again, like building that stock back up of the initial money that I'd put in. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to get another one of these. Works really, really well. Went into it, rushed into it, because I was so desperate to get one of my own sort of rent-to-rent unit. Manchester, spent an absolute fortune. I should have seen the red flags, because it was like prime Manchester location. Needed work doing. There was nobody renting it. Well, why was there no one renting it? They were open to company lets, but why had it not gone? I think it had been on the market a little while. I should have seen the red flags that you probably shouldn't be doing rent to rent here. But I didn't, and I kind of just went all in, threw all the money at it, spent weeks living in there, sleeping in there, no heating, fully redid the full flat, spent a fortune. And then about a month into having it operating, my cleaner turned up one day and just couldn't get in. So she got kicked out. I got kicked out with all my furniture, my 3 months rent up front, my deposit, everything's still in there. And it was an absolute nightmare. So they were kind of like my first sort of...
So what actually happened? What was the scenario?
The head lease didn't permit for serviced accommodation, but I asked the question to the agent and they said, yeah, that's fine, you can do it, we're happy with it. Probably being slightly desperate to get a site over the line for myself, that I should have done more due diligence, and I didn't, and I paid for it. So I think that taught me a really valuable lesson, kind of starting out, of like, just because it stacks up and it makes sense doesn't always mean it's something that you have to do. You kind of need to look beyond that. What's the red tape? What are the cons? And is it worth it? In hindsight, that one, no. Had it have been one that maybe I put £2,000 in, maybe yes.
How much do you think you put into that property?
About £10,000 to £12,000.
And how much do you think you saw back?
Maybe like £2,000-3,000.
That's a steep learning curve at an early stage.
Yeah, that was a good lesson to learn. Now I tell myself it was a bit emotional when I found out.
So that was obviously very early on.
Yeah.
And so you'd still gone through the process of sourcing deals.
Yeah.
But potentially just being a little bit over-optimistic, ignoring red flags mean that you've been set back again because you've now lost potentially up to 5 figures very early on. When was obviously now your focus is on high-yielding HMOs. How did you progress firstly in the rent-to-rent space? And then when did you transition into the HMOs?
Pretty early on, I transitioned into the HMOs, kind of after that had happened. So that was probably within the first 6 months, all of this had happened. I sort of regrouped. I thought, well, I'm pretty much back at zero now, so we should probably refocus, look to where we want to be next in the business. And it was HMOs. The rent to HMO space to me was an interesting way in. So, and the HMO space to me has always been, that's been stable to me. That makes sense because I've got tenants in all the time. It's not service accommodation that I'm relying on certain things out of my control. I'm relying on seasonality. No, I'm relying on, this is a 6-month AST agreement. You're in my house and you have to give me notice. So it was very much more stable way into it. I've always liked the high return, high cash flow. It's always been the motive. So then obviously doing the BRR to HMO strategy just sort of made sense. Obviously, HMOs, they do get a lot of publicity online, so you start to see and you start to hear about them, learn about them. Obviously, Savoy's massively promoted them, and you start to get to understand, okay, this is a much safer way for me to invest my money and obviously my clients' money. So it was just a case of starting out. I moved back to Newcastle. I know it. I was a student there for 4 years, lived there all of that time. So I was very familiar with the area. I knew what worked. I knew where I lived when I was a student. I knew where I lived when I was a working professional there. So it kind of made sense to then try and carry that on for myself. So I already had the strategy. I mean, I already had the location sort of nailed. I knew the strategy was HMO. So it was just a case of then going out, speaking to agents, finding sites, getting much more comfortable with, okay, how do we create a HMO and how do we do that? Found a site, worked, made sense, put it to an investor. They were really happy. Went through bridging. I'd never kind of dealt with the bridging aspect before. And I more or less went straight into the project management on the HMO sourcing because I had a really good build team that had built HMOs. So
how did you find your build team?
It was just kind of like through word of mouth, and other people in the area were also using the same build team, and it was he was very happy to take on like multiple projects. I'd seen some of the HMOs that he'd created from other people in the area, so that was already quite a safe bet. So yeah, went down that route, found the site, put it to an investor, did the bridge, everything stacked up there, did the project, all went kind of smoothly, and then whilst this was all happening in legals, I kind of just knew I'd found the strategy that A, I wanted to invest in when I had the capital, and B, I knew was safe and it made sense for my clients.
What was your initial proposal at that point in time to your clients, and has that moved since then?
It's improved. I would say, to be fair, because I knew I had the build team, I did still offer that end-to-end service. But I mean, I've done countless HMOs since, and I've dealt with every single aspect of HMO investing. So Article 4, sui gen HMOs, normal C3, C4, maisonette conversions. I've dealt with every aspect now. That it's much, much, much easier for me to give that full overall comprehensive view. And I feel much more confident, with clients because I've been there, I've seen it all and done it, to then guide them through a HMO. I think starting out, it's C3, C4, it's permitted development. These are the easy steps, whereas now I can go a lot more intricate into every aspect that needs to be taken care of. So yeah, it did kind of start out in the same way of build, project manage. Whereas now it's become a case of, okay, yeah, we build, we project manage, but you also work with the brokers. The banks endorse my product. So the brokers don't need to build a CV from me anymore because they know exactly who I am. The banks know who I am. Clients don't necessarily need experience. They can leverage off of my experience, and the banks are happy with that. We recently obviously bought the sales and letting agents to then bring the HMO management in-house as well. Obviously having the maintenance team. So I think it's more improved than changed over the years.
And then in terms of your offering, so let's say, for example, let's do some Robert. I'm an investor. So I've said,
Are
okay,
we pitching?
I'm not pitching. I'm just trying to understand. So I'm saying I'm an investor and look, I've got X amount of money. I turn around and say, look, I've got like £130,000 that I want to invest. What can I do? What if I approached you with that proposal? Like that was my initial stance. What could I do?
Perfect. So I guess the first thing is what does the investor ideally want out of it? Now, usually they want the highest return and the sort of highest cash flow. So typically we would go to the HMO side of things. It is enough capital to do that, particularly in the Northeast, because your purchase prices are lower. So essentially how it would work is you would come on board as a client. So we'd go through all the case studies, everything we've done. You'd on board as a client. We'd then find a site that matches your requirements. From finding that site, we'd obviously take you through all the conveyancing process, deal with the bridging and the lenders. I deal with that for my clients and meet the valuers, val packs, which is so important. Deal with everything there through the conveyancing side, and then of course obviously kick in and run all the project management. So that would include obviously making sure the building's done in time and on budget. Everything's done to regs. We deal with building control, HMO licensing, and then refinance at the back end as well. So essentially for the client, all their role really is when the initial forms come in is paying the solicitors and, signing where they need to, and the same on the lending side of things. Again, when the project starts, is paying in the installments for the builds, or I would work with the development finance and deal with the asset manager in that sense. Picking colours and things like that. We would then take care of everything else for them to give them the full finished product. And then the same thing now where we can offer the tenant find and obviously the property management as well. It's just a case of them giving the yes or no on the tenant app. So it really is a hands-off kind of service that we've built.
In terms of the ownership, the general structure is that the client will still own the property and then you're paid throughout the service for each step that you deliver.
Exactly. We're a service provider. Yeah, we're a service provider, exactly. So that they are 100% ownership when it's finished.
Nice. And for your specific model in the HMO space, what would you say is your entry requirement in terms of capital if somebody wanted to work with you?
Minimum 100K. If you're looking to go down the sort of larger HMO route. We can do smaller projects, but most people tend to want HMO. So yeah, minimum 100K.
And specifically, obviously, with you now scaling, like you said, you started off doing 1 or 2, now doing 20, and I know you've got aspirations to grow that even further. Where do you see like the market size in the area that you're currently operating in? Do you think there's enough scope for you to continue to grow at such speed?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're not just kind of in one area of the Northeast, but we're very focused on which areas. The Northeast is really vast. You from London, so probably don't get up there much. But it's
by the way, do you see anything above like
Midlands.
North London is the north? Like even the Midlands is the north if you're from London.
No, we'll like go on a map and like scroll, and then like you'll get there.
Okay.
But we're very focused on kind of like our main sort of city centre areas. Now, the thing about the Northeast is it's having major regen, major growth. So the areas that we're in, Newcastle, Gateshead, Sunderland, they're having multi-million pounds of reinvestment put into the area to bring the growth. So it's not an area that's going to see that saturation point anytime soon. And I think particularly because we've got the management side of the business, I see the demand, it's crazy. You can put a room on for a house, and I think within about 5 days, maybe it's 30 inquiries are coming in. For a room, and it's at top rents. So we aren't seeing a decline. If anything, we're seeing a growth. One of the main strategies that we focus on is obviously building high-end accommodation. Now, it's not always creating new conversions, but sometimes it might be improving what's already there. So, a lot of our sites now are in existing Article 4 areas, meaning they're already HMOs, but they're rubbish. They're really tired. They're run down. So as we're seeing more landlords exiting the market, I'm not creating new stock, I'm improving what's there. And I think it's balancing that. Obviously, not everything has to be a HMO, so we do flat conversions, multi-units, so it's having that whole balance across the portfolio of what we do for us and we invest in, and the same for the clients. That then means you can kind of balance everything out.
From like, obviously, despite the fact that you went to uni there, you've lived there for a while, you're not necessarily like a local. You've still come in as an outside investor to a degree. What's like the perception of you, I guess, from local residents? That was by the way, if you noticed, you couldn't hide it. That was a big eesh.
Yeah, not fun. It depends. It depends on the area. Like when we're dealing with pre-existing HMOs, it's fine. Really, really good response because the house is already there. It's never actually stopped anything we've done, but I think locals can kind of have that negative perception. So on one of my sites, that's a mixed use, and oh my God, the neighbours are just being so hard work. We've had multiple call outs from planning, from building control, everyone. The neighbours are just calling them and sending them out, saying we're knocking through the commercial to the resi, we're knocking through. Do you know, just like making things up that clearly aren't happening.
Yeah.
And I think the council's getting quite sick of sort of coming out because they know that we're not doing anything wrong. So it depends on the area, it depends on the project type, but typically where we're doing our full sort of back to brick conversions, the neighbours are never really your biggest fans, are they?
Yeah, I mean, look, we have to be fair. If somebody starts building next door to me and I want to sleep,
exactly,
I'm not gonna love it. But there's also common sense of, okay, it's not great to have builders next door, but at the same time, if you're improving the standard of the accommodation, the stock, it's going to improve your neighbours, potentially your property values. There's an element of give and take.
Yeah, I guess there's probably a slight difference in versus, you know, when you're creating luxury home conversions. If I'm creating a HMO, there is sometimes that negative stigma. When they see the house and they see what they create, yes, they're much more open to it, but at the same time, it's a neighbour's perspective, but you're not actually doing anything wrong.
I think naturally human beings are adverse to change. So like even when we do like a house to flat conversions, multi-units, people are like, oh, you're destroying family homes. But then also I'm like, how many people are still having 5 kids? Like, so we're looking at supply and demand. Do you think HMOs have an unfair negative reputation? Thank you to those of you who have liked, shared, commented, but most importantly, subscribed to the channel. Did you know only 28% of people that regularly watch my videos have subscribed? Now we're trying to get that to 40% so we can bring on bigger and better guests and make better content for you. So if you could do that right now, myself and my team would really appreciate it. Now back to the video.
I can understand where the stigmas come from. So I don't think it's necessarily unfair because it makes sense. I mean, I've been in some atrocious houses that really do make you upset. I think that there is a lot of negative stigma around it, and we're trying to change that, and sometimes that's difficult. I know in some of the areas it when it's planning involved, it's very, very strict on sort of what can be passed. You have to be going for the top high end, which I don't think is a bad thing because that's what I build. But I can understand why the stigma's there, but I think that's more so on the landlord as opposed to the tenant type. You know, put people in a nice house, treat people well, and make sure that you build something that, you know, that they would want to live in. Naturally, you should hope to get that same respect back. Yeah.
What do you find the hardest about developing HMOs?
Do you know what I would say one of the hardest sides of it we did is when we're going from the C3, we're taking a resi and then we're converting it into a sui gen, so 7 beds plus, because it's a completely different ball game from the building perspective, from the fire perspective, from the sound perspective. That then just, it changes the scope of a build. The easy conversions where we are just, we've kind of, I guess we've put that many through of them. I know I'm not directly on the tools, so somebody may have a slightly different answer to me, but you're just following a procedure, you know. You're taking walls out, you're putting walls in, you're putting, it's a building process. So that side, so to speak, is relatively, we've got it sort of unlocked now, I would like to say.
But so you're saying like the unforeseen when you're doing, like you said, like a sous generous HMO
Yeah.
conversion, and you're having to deal with changes in like part L, like the insulation and
Yeah,
things like that, and sound
exactly.
testing or fire risk assessments that can be difficult. Okay, so it's just the different moving parts.
Yeah.
What about navigating, operating in different councils in terms of their
Yeah.
requirements? How do
Yeah.
you find that, and how do you stay on top of that?
The biggest thing for me was fine-tuning my architect. That was massive. I work solely pretty much with one architect now who solely specialises in HMO. Different councils have different requirements, like especially when we're in our Article 4 areas. You sort of think you've got it nailed. These are my space standards. This is this. And then it can be completely flipped on its head because the councils can make their own requirements. So I think that's difficult. But it's future proofing, and sort of when we know a patch that works, you can build that out. I think from the other perspective is licensing. We've had it a couple of times, the law is the way that a license run. This has to be the size, the tenant needs this much space, X, Y, and Z. And then sometimes you'll end up with somebody from licensing who, but I just don't like that and I want that changed. So it's navigating people sometimes, I guess, more than navigating what's black and white on paper.
Yeah. And I guess giving people what they want sometimes within reason.
Within that's the most important thing, within reason. Like, yes, if this would make so what we do is at the start of every project, building control obviously comes out, but HMO licensing will come out at the start of a project. I said, this is our plans with the property. Would you prefer to see anything different? And providing it's not going to completely change the scope of the build or it's unreasonable, then I just accommodate it from day one, because it's much easier to implement as opposed to fix at the last minute.
Very, very good advice. I think that this is like the old thing in building, that you measure twice and cut once.
Yes, literally.
If you could change anything throughout your journey, outside of maybe spending that 10 grand on the rent to rent, what would you change if you could?
Maybe slightly controversial, but I think, I don't know how much I want to get into that one.
Nah, like now people are gonna
I
want to know what
maybe
you
we
got.
could just go.
Nah, you can't do that. No, come on. Let's be avid, yeah.
I guess in just a general sense of like, always, before you go into business with anybody, stress test it. I think now very much I've fine-tuned everybody that I want to work with, and everybody for the right reasons. So I guess sometimes it's playing more of the long game and not going for the quickest thing that looks like it's going to make the most money, but sort of thinking, stepping back, what's the long game? Is everybody aligned? Is everybody on the same page? So that's one option. And then, yeah, we'll leave it with that one.
Okay. Have you got like an unpopular belief in property, but you would actually stand on?
No.
No?
Have you? This
No,
might inspire me.
I think one of my, so for example, one of mine is that like an unpopular fact is that I think property probably won't make most people rich, in terms of that's not like, most people don't get rich getting into property. They make money through a business that services it, but just buying property isn't necessarily like a get rich.
Yeah. Yeah, I do agree with that. I mean, it's definitely the way that I think I've done it. And I guess one thing that I have changed over the last year is I got very trapped in this sort of short-sightedness, so to speak, of, oh, this is a really good site. This is a client. I've made money there. It's a business. And you're providing, but like a lot of them sites, I wish I bought them.
Yeah.
So I guess that's sometimes where you sort of kick yourself with. Luckily, again, that comes with years and that comes with experience. I think I had to know and build everything that I had done to then now be able to say, okay, I want this one, I'm going to buy it. The capital's there, the lending and things like that. That all makes sense. So probably just learning and building as you grow.
What does the future look like for you? What do the next few years look like?
100% building up my portfolio. So I think this year I've bought 4, hopefully 5 sites by the end of the year. All conversion based, all pretty big projects. I want to ideally at least double that in the next years coming, year on year. So my goal is obviously to build out my portfolio because that's then going to sustain me. Obviously, we're opening the office in about 4 weeks, which is really exciting. So
Is there an opening party? Where's
yes,
the invites?
there is an invite. I promise
Okay,
that there is an
okay,
invite
okay,
coming.
I'm
You
just
can
checking.
find where the north is, which will be. Yeah.
I'm gonna, you know what I mean?
You're
I'm
gonna
gonna find something else.
Venture.
Anyone's got any podcast going on in the north? Well, I'll be up there for the day, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
film some content as well.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, we'll do that. So the office opening, which is really exciting. Building out a team. So now just trying to like work through, find people who can, I guess, work like I do in terms of finding sites, really building up the back office of dealing with our off-market sites as well. So continuing to build out Cafasso Developments and, you know, the construction and management side of the company, and then building out my portfolio.
Let me hear the Italian version of Cafasso.
Cafasso.
Okay. I just need to understand. Okay, amazing.
What got so lost?
Amazing. Okay, so building out Cafasso Developments. That's a lot of really positive stuff. And I think that's amazing. But I think one thing I always try and do is also touch on the negatives, because online we see a lot of wins and we don't see a lot of the truths behind the stuff that you have to deal with as an entrepreneur, how rocky that road is. So I think particularly for you as your journey, like being firstly as a woman in property, how have you found that, and what do you think you would have to navigate that's different from maybe your male counterparts?
I think in some ways I've found it as an advantage because I know who I am and what I want to do, I guess. It's a very male dominated space now. In ways I don't let that impact me, but I guess in some ways it's easier to slightly push yourself under the radar and maybe not always speak of exactly how you want things to pan out. So that's kind of something, but I don't know if that's just an overall confidence thing that then builds as years go on. But I definitely do sometimes kind of see bouts of there can be a difference between men and women in the space, but I think there is a lot of opportunity to kind of even the playing field. I try not to do too much of the comparison as you're doing it, because I think it's really easy to kind of see what someone else is doing and think, oh, I wish I was doing that. Whereas like when you focus on yourself, I think a lot of that, even with social media, I just try to focus very much on what we do and what's actually going on, and not putting out there of I'm living some type of lifestyle, because I wake up every day, I graft, I work really hard, I go to the gym, go to bed, and that is the day-to-day of it. And some days are really terrible, and some days you're like, oh my God, I'm on a really winning streak. So I think it's just kind of like working to find that balance. And yeah,
you've touched on burnout at a point, and you've mentioned about doing 6 till 12, so 18-hour days at points as well. Where's your work-life balance, and how do you stop burnout?
I don't think you can. I don't think it's fair to say there's a balance, because there's not. Like, for example, over the summer, I got really lucky. I had a lot of holidays. I know we were trying to pin down a date for a while. I had a lot of holidays. Sometimes when I was away, I was like, I wish I wasn't here because I've got so much pressure and stress. I'm dealing with it whilst I'm away, but I would much rather be at home. I don't think you can balance out, and I don't think you can say exactly what this month will bring. Sometimes it's like a wave. Like sometimes things are going amazing and everything amazing happens around it. And then the next few weeks, everything can be going wrong. And at that point, you have to lock in. There isn't time for balance. So, you know, my ideal setup is I wake up in the morning, I go to the gym, I do my full day in the office, and then usually on an evening I'll still be sorting stuff out, or I'll be training. That's an ideal. Sometimes it's not the case. Sometimes you wake up really early, you don't go to the gym, you work all day long, a million things happen, you still don't get there on an evening, and your day changes. So I don't think balance works. And then sometimes you can go on a weekend away with your friends, and amazing, and you get the time to do that. So yeah, there is no balance, and burnout comes when it wants to come. I think
I think and a lot of people find that. A lot of people have this idea of what it's like to be an entrepreneur and what it looks like. So right, I wake up at 4 a.m. and I journal, and then I do this and then I do that, and then I eat some kale. If you're a videographer, for some reason he still drinks full fat milk, but we're not going to get onto that.
Yeah, this is...
If full fat milk, by the way, this was a conversation off camera. Drinking full fat milk as an adult, crazy. I don't know if I'm crazy here.
It's concerning.
Yeah,
it is.
Very concerning. But we persevere. But yeah, I think the phrase you used that I liked there was I just lock in, because I use that phrase a lot. I'm like, listen, when people are asking how's it going, I'm just like, just gotta lock in.
Just gotta lock in.
Like,
Just
listen,
gotta head down.
yeah, like listen, see the journey as an entrepreneur as like a roller coaster. It's gonna take you where it's gonna go. Just put your seatbelt on, be prepared for the ride, and enjoy it, because a lot of the time you just got to be locked in.
You just got to be locked in, no questions asked. Like,
Stay safe.
yeah, this is just happening. I think every time once you push through it, it always comes out better. Things always do improve, and that's that key thing of, well, this is going to make you as an entrepreneur, or this is going to break you. So yeah, not for the faint-hearted, but very, very achievable.
Another question slightly about diversity is also around age. You mentioned now that you're building out a team, you're trying to find the right people that fit into your ethos. But how have you found like being a young manager, a young business owner?
Good. Yeah, I think at the minute it works quite well. I think sometimes, particularly when I end up dealing with landlords, I think because I am the way I am. I think because I am the way I am, I'm very much, this is happening, we're doing it. I'm locked in. I'm all in. So I have to find people that can work on that style for me. I'm quite high energy. I'm quite fast paced. I will be texting you at 11 o'clock at night about something admin based or something completely crazy or brainstorming. I will be doing that. So I need people who can match me with that energy. We're getting quite a lot of our biggest deals over the line at the minute, but sometimes it's dealing with landlords who work completely opposite to me, and I have to kind of try and mold to their work way to, get that deal done and not to come across as, this is how I do things and this is how they need to be done, because I'm quite by the book. Obviously, it's a big site. There's a lot of money involved. You've kind of got to make sure that you tick off every step, whereas someone old school, maybe a bit more blasé. So it's about being able to mold and work with different people in different environments. But I think sort of from age thing and building out a team, ideally just people who really, really want to be successful and have that drive and are prepared to sort of put the hours in and work really hard. I guess you kind of gauge that from someone quite soon.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I think a lot of people, personnel is like the cornerstone of your business, because people have to buy into your ethos. They have to want to work like you, operate like you, and also deliver the same level of service that's going to represent the brand you've built.
Yeah, which I think maybe hard. It's trying to print yourself. You can't do it.
Yeah.
So I guess at some point you probably have to slightly step back from that, but we will see how it goes.
Yeah, no, definitely. And how, I know you mentioned you're not necessarily on the tools, but in terms of delivering these high-end products, how involved are you in the oversight, the quality control, and also the ultimate design as well?
Yeah, I would say very much so. So because we're doing them sort of at scale, you essentially build a blueprint, don't you? This is what these projects are going to look like. There's a few kind of variants that happen there, colours, layouts and things like that. So obviously from day one, when we go into the site, we deal with the layouts, we deal with the colours and getting everything matched up. And then from my side of things, it's about delivering on that. We manufacture all our own kitchens and our built-in furniture now. So we've kind of got our 2 bespoke package options there. So it's more so going into the site, agreeing the layouts. I've got a really good build team. Michael, obviously, who's our head builder as well. Really trusted team there who understand the delivery of it. So yes, you've got to be involved, but you've kind of got multiple people that you can bounce off with there being sort of so many sites going on. It's quite nice to have like a good team that you can bounce around everything with. But yeah, just making sure. A lot of my role is on the client side of things as well. So making sure that, they are up to date every week and budgets are on track and timescales are on track and clients are kept in the loop about where their project is, and doing the site check-ins more from that perspective as well.
Back to that sort of final question around the deals themselves. So obviously you spoke about sort of minimum entry requirements is 100K, but for you now, like, give me an example of a deal you've recently completed or currently working on. What does a good deal look like for you, from money in, purchase price, works, end values, rents? Give me like a full kind of package.
Yeah, so 2 different examples really. So obviously there's my own site. With it being my own site, I guess I get even more of the benefit. So that's a mixed use site. We actually bought that for 100 grand, and I still don't know how I managed to get it so cheap. 100k purchase. We spent 100 on the refurb and then 360 end val. So I'm pulling everything out plus like 20-30k. Obviously, if I go the 75%, that will make with the commercial 62k a year.
So what's it ending up being? Is it a single residential unit?
No, so it's a 6-bed HMO, all en suite,
yeah.
and then a commercial on the side as well. So that's leased out on a 5-year lease, and then all the rooms are about 150 a week.
Okay.
So 62k a year off that. That's like obviously the wow.
Yeah, like the unicorn, the ones you want to find.
Yeah, and then so that's a really fun site. I like having the commercial element. Didn't realize how much I liked having the commercial element, but it's just that little like icing on the cake.
Commercial's great because once you signed your lease, it's like, oh, the roof is leaking. Yep. Here's the invoice for half of it. There's problems.
Yeah,
it's very much a case of as hands off and passive as it gets,
which is nice. Yeah,
property.
I think when I'm looking at how many sort of rooms we've got under management, having some hands off options is quite nice. So yeah, so that's sort of a typical deal, for example. And then on the other side, one we just finished for a client, so that was more expensive. So we bought an Article 4, but it's like a big 300 meter squared old Victorian house. So that was 296 purchase price, 60k on the refurb because it was just improving what was already there. Refinanced at 490. So again, everything was pulled back out on the refinance, and then that's 57,000 gross a year. So 23k net a year he's walking away with. And that's been fully hands off for him. So there's the kind of scope of the sites that we're doing. Doing quite a lot of larger ones, coming up sort of 18 beds with studios, which is...
It's interesting. You sound like you're going to have your hands full. Well,
I know.
We from the PBK community wish you all the best. It's been amazing to have you on. For people that want to connect with you, how can they reach out to you? How can they get in touch? Because now you've told them about those great deals.
Yeah, I know.
They're going to be banging your phone line down. So you now got to tell them how they can find you. They can't call me. They got to call you.
They've got to call me. No, that's fine. Instagram is a good way to reach me. So it's Adriana Cafasso. And then obviously my website as well is Cafasso Developments, and you can book a call through there.
Amazing. Well, we're going to be back next week with another fantastic guest. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe. Furthermore, if you haven't already, do it right now, because I don't know what you've been doing all this time. But yeah, catch you next week for another episode of the PBK podcast.